Good morning, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about your local plan and budget. This morning I have with me Chris Dressler.
Hey.
And Tony Regai.
Good morning, Vietnam. North Carolina.
And Ashley.
Good morning.
Bob is not with us today. Bob had a death in the family and is out of the office, so we are going to work on this as a team this morning and get started. So today what we're going to talk about is your local plan and budget. You'll remember from our webinar last week that we spoke about the 9 required activities. And your local plan is really a document that helps you tell us and others how you are addressing each of the 9 required activities. And so this document is a listing of the activities that you're going to be doing throughout your year that helps strengthen your career and technical ed programs, how you link with your secondary partners, connect there with all aspects of industry, or how you're going to improve and expand or develop new programs, professional development, how you're going to evaluate your programs, and how you're going to modernize, expand what you have, and work with your special population students. And so when you do your plan, there are some questions that you want to ask your team, and that's how do your activities meaningfully evaluate or measure the use of funds, and what activities are going to improve your student outcomes. Keep in mind that what drives the decision-making process for Perkins is on how you plan to use the funds. And so some questions you might ask are, how do you know what is needed on your campus? What programs are in need of equipment? So all of our colleges have some type of program review, and so one method that you might want to take a look at is your program review process. And if there have been needs identified by your advisory committees or your employers, let's say they tell you that the equipment that you're using is not what is currently used in industry, that's a real good indication that Perkins might be able to step in and help you modernize that program. And always keep in mind the Perkins performance indicators and how will your activities help improve those. And so basically when you're doing this, you're going to want to assemble a team that has a working knowledge of what is needed in your program areas.
One thing to keep in mind, the underlying theme of all of the Perkins activities is to enhance CTE programs of study. Whatever activity you plan under your local plans, every activity needs to in some way relate back to enhancing CTE programs of study.
And that's a good litmus test for whether or not the activity is something that should be in your local plan. Now, with Perkins and your local plan, you do not have to spend Perkins monies on 9 activity areas, but you do have to identify in your plan how you plan to fund the activities, whether it's with state monies, other grant funding, or a combination of that. And so you'll also, in your local plan document, which we'll show you in a second, you also will have to identify what performance indicators or indicator the activity will improve. And so as you go about that, those are the elements that you'll see in our local plan.
And just be sure you address all 9 activities, and as Julia said, you don't have to fund them through Perkins, but all 9 activities must be addressed and the funding source must be attached to that activity.
Some of the common pitfalls that we see with our local plans is that they have generic activities. For example, you may have a statement or an activity that says you'll utilize the program review to identify needs. What would be better is that something of the nature that our automotive plan will undergo a program review process this year, and we will address with employers the need for updating our equipment. So specify the programs you're going to be working with. The same thing is true with equipment. Don't just say we're going to purchase equipment as needed. you need to put in where your focus is. And remember, this year our focus is on our pathways, our professional development, and performance. And so two other common pitfalls is that the local plan and budget are created in isolation. So you definitely want to make sure that you involve your faculty in this process in some way. Tony, you want to add anything?
Yeah, well, the idea of the same plan being used every year, if you're sustaining efforts that are successful, that's okay. But we like to see new stuff infused so that you're not only sustaining, but you're planning ahead for the things that are going to happen in your region, because we know that in CTE programs of study we try to address business and industry needs, and so you only sustain what's going on, but you work with your local chambers and folks to see what's coming down the pike to anticipate those things as well as sustain those successful practices.
Mm-hmm. And there have been several colleges that have been leveraging multiple grants to maximize their impact on their programming. And that is definitely something that you can infuse into your local plan. Just keep in mind the intent is to improve, modernize, or expand your CTE programming. So along with the local plan, you also will be submitting a budget. Now, the budget's not set in stone. You will have some flexibility throughout the year, but ultimately, initially, your budget must be approved. And so once you indicate how you plan to spend your budget or your money, you will start with an initial budget, and then from that point on, any changes in the budget must be submitted for approval. And so that's really important. That's coming from our EDGAR regulations. And so anytime you make a change, you would need to let either Tony or myself know that that's coming. And we'll have a separate webinar on how to do that in our Perkins system at a later date. But it's a very painless process, and you just tell us where the money is, where it's going, and give us a justification for the move. And then we'll work with you to make that happen. A part that is often missed is that your local plan and budget need to be cross-referenced. So if you have items in your budget, they must be in your local plan. So for example, you can't have a piece of equipment or an activity listed in the budget that's not referenced in your local plan document. And we'll show you how to make sure that that happens here in a second. Anything else?
The only thing, the biggest issue I think coming up now with budget is salary. And Bob is going to issue some directives, not for this coming year, but I think for the 17-18 budget year and grant cycle. There'll be some new information about salaries. We indicated some of it in emails, but all this stuff is open to renegotiation once we get a new plan, which we're expecting this year. So just expect some changes on the way salaries are budgeted and handled in the next grant cycle.
And to piggyback off of that, last week you heard very briefly about time and effort documentation, and we just want to kind of reinforce that all positions that are funded through Perkins, including student tutors, are bound by time and effort documentation. And if you are unsure of what documentation to use, feel free to let Tony or myself know, and we'll walk you through that process. But we're going to be putting out our handbook here shortly, and we're actually addressing tutors and providing some best practices on how to make sure that time and effort documentation is done correctly. So at this point, Chris, I'm going to let you help me out here. Do we have any questions about what we've presented before we jump over to Moodle and talk about how to work with that system?
I don't see any.
All right, one last chance for questions?
Wait, I didn't mean to do that. I didn't mean to do that.
Technical problem. Let's see here. Alrighty, so as we move on, for the local plan and budget, we will be using our Perkins online data system in Moodle to collect the documentation for that. And so the first thing you will need to know is that each college has a login that the username is some variation of the name of the college. You don't use your personal Moodle account here. You actually will use the college account to submit your local plan elements. And so what you'll do is go to ncperkins.org and click Login, and then you will type in your college name. And in my case, I'm going to jump into a demo account, hopefully. So let me jump in and make that switch. All right. Alright, so once you log in, you'll go to My Courses and Perkins Online Data System. And what you will see here is each of the parts of your local plan and budget. So each year there are several documents that your college is going to need. And at this point, Tony, I do believe we have everybody's assurances and allotments.
Yes, I think we're caught up on everything except the new things we asked for.
Job descriptions?
A couple of schools are selecting budgets and a couple of items, but that's simply because faculty hadn't showed up to specify their needs. But I think we're about 98% complete on that.
So for those of you who are brand new to Perkins and have jumped in after your documents are submitted, we do have everybody's contact information. We have their allotment acceptance form, and we have their assurances. And so briefly what these are, your contact information, we're asking for your Perkins contact, your chief financial officer or their designee, and your chief academic officer. If you are a college that has more than one Perkins coordinator, feel free to go ahead and add each person that's a part of your team there. The allotment acceptance form is just a document that when we click here, this document basically says that your college is officially accepting the funds, and that by doing so you're going to agree to, okay, and so that pops up. So basically you're agreeing that you're going to be doing the 9 required activities that you see here. So basically you'll sign this, and then your board of trustees and president will have to sign this documentation. And if we jump back over to our data system, and our assurances, there is a short video that talks about the importance of this document that you have to watch before you can click on your assurances. But this document, after you watch the video, this will become available. And basically it lists the 9 activities, and you're signing off that your college is going to plan to do those activities. So then we're going to come down to our local plan document. And so here is the nuts and bolts that we're talking about today. And the first thing that we have here is our local plan. And so I'm going to open this, and it is in a spreadsheet form. And once that opens up, so what you'll have here is a template to start working with your activities. And so you'll notice over here on the left-hand side, you have several sections, and each section is actually one of the 9 required activities. And so what you're going to do for strengthening academic and career and technical skills, you're going to come over here and provide us with a description of the activity. And keep in mind that this needs to be something that you can measure. So if you are planning to do a program review like the example I gave earlier for automotive, you would put in a description of that process. And then over here in the next column, you'll hit the down arrow, and you will choose what performance indicators that this activity is going to address, and if you have more than one, you can continue to add those. In column E here, we have the source of funds, and let me increase the font size so we can see this a little better here. So under the source of funds, you have the ability to do Perkins, your local state, a combination, or you may have other grant funds or other sources, or you may have some activities that do not require funding, and so you can indicate that. Now, this year, this document will be returned to you quarterly, and what you'll do at the end of the quarter is tell us what's the status of this project. So if you have started the project in that first quarter, you'll tell us, and you'll give us a little brief update of the description. So ultimately, hopefully by the end of the year, you will have worked through your plan and completed that. Now, we understand that there may be times that you need to deviate from the activities you plan. So, Tony, what should they do if they need to make changes here?
Well, just let us know, and we can go in and help you negotiate those changes through and make sure they all meet the criteria of the particular section. And then change your plan. I mean, it's pretty simple, really.
Yeah. It's just a matter of really letting us know and just making sure that the change doesn't impact that you are completing the 9 activities. That's really the big thing here, is that if you do not intend to do an activity, that does not leave you not addressing that. And what we have found is that by the nature of our SACS accreditation, you're really doing these activities. It's just a matter of telling us what it is you're actually doing.
And if you need any ideas, like if you think you're behind or you just can't really come up with some good ideas, we'd be more than happy to share some best practices, some ideas that we've gotten from other colleges and from our research across the country.
Yeah, and the one activity that seems to give everybody the most trouble is size, scope, and quality. And part of the reason is the way that we are structured in North Carolina. We can't just start at the local level a brand new course. Our employer comes to us and says, hey, I'd like a course in this topic. We can't just at the local level develop that course and start offering it. So it has to go through a vetting process that goes to the state level. And so everything we do in terms of curriculum programs is size, scope, and quality. That said, you may have activities that are of sufficient size, scope, and quality to improve your CTE student experience. I saw a great example of that yesterday with a student wellness center. That was a one-stop opportunity that dealt with everything from clothing, food needs, transportation, childcare. But it's an activity that's of sufficient size and scope that it could impact a wide variety of students at that local college.
To put a plug in for Advanced Manufacturing Week, that's a great way to have size, scope, and quality in a Perkins activity.
Yes. And so that is one that seems to give everybody the most trouble, and we see just about everything under the sun in that category. But look at what are you doing locally that is of sufficient size to help the vast majority of your CTE students. And so we have 8 to 9 blocks in each area. That doesn't mean you have to fill them all in. 1 or 2 is sufficient.
As long as they're meaningful and what you do in each section has a good impact to enhance CTE programs of study. That's what we're looking for. It could be one large activity that takes a lot of planning and a lot of effort, or at least a couple of activities that enhance your programs of study for CTE students.
And you may have activities that actually cross bounds and meet more than one of the 9 required activities. And it's perfectly acceptable to list it twice in each of those sections.
And if you would, I mean, this is just for my Julie, as we go through these, and if you just have something that crosses over, instead of saying a reference back to 1.6, just go ahead and write it out again and just copy and paste it in, because it helps us as we go through, not have to shuffle back and forth through the paper.
Yeah, and if we were to be monitored, somebody from the outside taking a look at that document could easily see that you're addressing the 9 activities. And so you're going to go through and work through each of the activities that you have here. Another best practice that we're seeing is doing mini grants, and this works well for both equipment and professional development. And if you do something like that, you may ask, well, how can I be specific? Put in the process. So you can state that you're going to be putting out a request for proposals from your faculty, and just outline the process in your local plan. And then once you know what you're going to be purchasing, you would just submit a budget modification, which we'll talk about in a second, for that equipment. So basically, you just go through the document, and to start off with, you have your activities. And just remember to be specific. Try not to use general terms, and use the litmus test. Can it be measured, that if it was completed or not? And so you have professional development. You'll come through and you have evaluations. If you come on down here, modernization and expansion, we have size, scope, and quality, and then finally special populations. And I know that our colleges are doing some really great things with their special population students, so you may have initiatives here that you see, and so feel free to give us a sampling of what you're doing to meet the needs of your special populations. Now remember, if you're using Perkins funds to fund an activity, it has to be listed somewhere in your local plan. So do we have any questions about the local plan document before I move on to budget? Are we good? Okay. Okay, Chris, I am. Oh, there it is. So the next part of your local plan and budget is the actual budget documentation. And so if you scroll down here, you'll see that we have the local plan submission. So if you click on that, you can download the template here. And when you first initially submit your budget for approval, this year we were optimistic, and it did come to fruition. We were optimistic that we would get a budget much earlier, so we started the planning process before we actually knew what your official allotment would be. We had a very, very close ballpark, so every college was given a figure. If you're unsure, for our brand new folks, what your allotment is, just let Tony and myself know. We can tell you what the anticipated amount is. Our hope is that it will be passed at the state board next Friday, and as soon as that happens, once everybody's local plan and budget is approved, we'll start releasing those funds so you can hit the ground rolling this year on time.
And it is important that you have all your documents to us by then so we can get your budget and stuff approved as quickly as possible. We've asked for those extra job descriptions and position justifications. Please have those in to us before the board meets a week from this Friday so we can do the turnaround time for those approvals.
Yes, I think we have 2 weeks.
2 weeks. We have 2 weeks. Yeah, a week from this coming Friday. That's just 2 weeks away,
yeah,
right?
2 weeks away.
I think I was right.
Yeah, you're right.
Well, I may not.
I think we are.
I'm really right.
We're good. We're close.
Really right and hardly ever wrong.
So this right here is kind of your anticipated budget. Now, once the state board approves the budget, we will be using a system inside of here where you actually tell us where the line items of where the budget is, what you're going to start with. But this is what you're submitting for approval. Now, these are pretty general categories, and so what you'll do is, in your budget, you have the ability to take 5% off the top of your grant for administration. If you are a consortium, that 5% is off the top by the lead college, and the consortium members may not take an additional 5%.
We strongly recommend if you have a large budget and a large amount of Perkins activity, hire someone under administration section to help you coordinate the grant. We have some folks out there who are just extremely busy, and the grant sometimes gets, not the attention that it needs to get. If you need to use the funds to help somebody, to get somebody to help you run the grant, please do so.
And you can take that funds to help get an assistant to work with the paperwork.
Yes.
And that's something that we even have some small colleges that they have some employees that are getting a small stipend just to help assist with this documentation. So especially our medium to large size schools, that's something that you may want to consider there. So then, moving down the list, your capitalized equipment, those are your big ticket items. Now notice if I try to click here, it doesn't let me. That's because down here at the bottom we have another worksheet, and we have to have some more information regarding your equipment. Now, what you'll give us is a brief description of the piece of equipment, and you're going to have to cross-reference it with your local plan. So those activity numbers that were on your local plan, for example 2.3, you would put in what local plan activity numbers this is addressing, the anticipated cost, and then tell us the program and location. For our consortium schools, please let us know what college this is going to be used at, because we will, part of our EGRA regulations, we have to track equipment a little bit differently, and we'll have a webinar on that as the year gets started. But it's really important that you fill out this and let us know where the equipment is going to be. As we have been approving budgets, we maybe have asked you already to come back and give some more information. And then over here we have a box for justification. And it's really important to give us as much information about why this piece of equipment is necessary. One of the things we have to do is make sure that we don't get into supplanting issues. So if you're replacing equipment that you have already purchased with state funds, we can't do that. So let us know, hey, this is a new piece of equipment, or we're updating and modernizing what we're doing. But justification, the more information you can give about why this equipment is needed, the better we are to be able to make those determinations. Moving down the list, and once you type in a number here, so for example, if I have $25,000 here, when I come back to my initial budget, it will auto put in the amount that you need. So then we come into non-capitalized equipment and or significant technology items. So if you go and buy a tablet or a Chromebook that's less than $500, even though it doesn't fall between this amount, you still have to list that per our regulations. And so this form is identical to the other, local plan number, the cost, and once again, if you put in the amount, you'll give us the location and the justification for it. And once again, that figure comes over to our spreadsheet here. Now, non-consumable supplies. You don't have an extra worksheet with this, so you can just come in and say we're going to estimate that we're going to take $6,000 that's going to be used for non-consumable supplies. Now, an area that comes up often is consumable supplies. Let's say that your college is just starting a cosmetology program. There are consumable supplies that are purchased that are needed for instruction. For the first 3 years of that program, you could use Perkins monies to purchase those consumable supplies. But after that 3-year period, just like all of your other programs have a budget under state funds, consumable supplies typically need to be moved over to state funds after the program's been around for 3 years and is generating FTE.
Yeah, that three-year window is pretty much standard across the board for these things. That Perkins is not meant to sustain indefinitely programs. It's meant to enhance, to begin, and then for the college to sustain those efforts.
Okay. Yeah. So for that, make sure that if you're doing consumable supplies, which you'd have to list down here under other, make sure that you're doing it for a brand new program that's in the first 3 years. And if you have a program that's you're funding and you are getting towards the end of that, start making plans to roll that over to your state funds. Okay. Travel/professional development, you would just put in the dollar amount you anticipate to spend here. Once we get down to our actual starting budget, you'll have to break that out into registration, in-state travel, lodging, all of that good stuff. But for your initial budget, you don't have to worry about breaking that down into that. You may have purchase services. Maybe you're hiring somebody to come in to do some professional development. You would give the amount. And then we have salaries and benefits. Now this section is one of those that's locked down. Down here we have a salaries and benefits tab. And basically you're going to give a position title for the position. You're going to give us the local plan activity numbers that show that why the position is needed. And then the percentage of Perkins funding that's being used. And it will auto-generate a time and effort. And it will go into that in more detail at a later webinar. But basically, there's more than one type of time and effort documentation. And it depends on if the student is, or the position is serving non-CTE students. And so if once we get, after this is over with, if you have questions about that, we can address it. But for the purpose here, just know that it will tell you what time and effort form is needed. And so then you're going to put in the total cost of the position. Just like travel, you don't have to break it out here. You can just give us the anticipated total cost from Perkins. So let's say in this position we're going to be spending $27,000 because it's a 50-50 split. You can do that.
Some people, they break out the salaries, the benefits as separate from the salaries, put that as a separate line item. But if you want to just include the salaries and the benefits all in one, the total position cost, that's probably the best thing to do.
Right, and you won't have to break it down to us until you actually get your allotment and you place it into your line items working with your business office. And then your form, then once you get to that point and you know what those amounts are, then you can go ahead and make those adjustments. And every college will have to do that once they actually receive their budget package. And so once you do that, you will then have your initial budget listed here. Now you may have other line items that you use. We only listed the most common here. So you may want to add additional things. I've seen consumable supplies for a brand new program. Have you?
They do stuff like externships for your professional development. They'll do your Skills USA chapters will be under there. Should you choose to do a plan with that, just several things that you feel are significant expense and not included under one of these other areas.
We may ask for additional information on it, but you know the litmus test there is make sure it's in your local plan, and then usually it's a painless process. The biggest issue we see with those types of things is that there's not something in the local plan that helps us understand why that's important with what you're doing for the year. So once you are done with these documents, you will save them, and then you'll upload them to our Moodle system. And so we're going to get out of this. And so I'm going to go back to the main page. Once you get your documents, you're going to scroll down, and you'll see local plan submission. And so once you click on that, down here at the bottom, there is an Edit Submission button. And so you can click on that. And then what you're going to have here is an area for you to drop a file in. So I've already used this as a demonstration before. But basically, you just drag the file into this box, and you'll see it as it does here, and then you'll have a Submit button. And right now, since I've already done this, you'll see it there, but so it says Return. But the first time, you will see Submit here. And once you do that, we have access to it. When you return to the page, you will then see that you have added it, and your files are listed here. If you see this, you're good to go. And so if you have any questions with this, Ashley or myself or Tony can help you walk through the process.
In that order, yeah. Call me last. I'm definitely an end user on this, but I told them when they developed this, if I could use it, it was good to go.
And it is pretty easy to use. The biggest thing is just making sure that you hit Submit once you drag the file over.
Right.
And once you do that, we will be giving feedback through this, and in this particular example, there's some feedback already added, so you can see it here. But the cool thing is that this is also emailed to the contact. And so you'll get this in more than one fashion.
And primarily, as you enter your plans and budgets, the first grade you will see is under review, and we'll wait until, like I say, the next couple of weeks before we go ahead and approve the plans and the budgets once the state board gets their business done.
And if you see something like needs revisions, that you know, we know that mistakes happen. You know, we had a couple of folks who accidentally submitted the incorrect file. So if you do see needs revisions at this point, it means that we need additional information, and we've reached out and contacted those folks. But if you see that in there and we have not changed that to under review yet, it means that we're still waiting for something, or there was additional information needed. So the question I've had from a couple of colleges is, how can I see this kind of at a glance? So there's really two ways. This is Moodle. Many of your colleges out there are use this for your online classes. So for us, it's under grades. So if you come here, you're going to see a form that looks like this, and where it says grade, you will see either under review, accepted, needs revision. All of that will be here on this one page. Now, one last item with your local plan and budget. This is new to this year, and that is job descriptions. We've had a lot of changes. One of the changes that the reason we're having to take a lot closer look is that the legislature provided funding for coaches, career coaches, or is that the correct term?
Yes, career coaches is the correct term.
And so we had some colleges that had been hiring career coaches using Perkins. Unfortunately, that is now a supplanting situation, and we need to make sure the job description is different than what the legislature funded positions is.
And the issue with that is each local entity or college is to develop its own description based upon their needs. So there's some, like Julia said, there's some real danger of supplanting there, and we've got to be really, really careful about that.
And so many of you already have job descriptions available, and it is perfectly acceptable to submit the job description that you have or used when hiring. It doesn't have to be something new that you create, but we will need those prior to being able to approve any budgets that have salaries in them.
And please remember, every expenditure must be used to enhance CTE programs of study. If you hire an individual for a particular position, be sure that can be justified as enhancing CTE programs of study somehow.
And you want to be careful, especially in student services type positions. The reality is, if you have a student coming in, everybody is in the customer service business, and they're not going to turn away a student because they are not a CTE student.
Right.
So if you're paying for 100%, let's say in career counseling, and that person cannot serve non-students. And so the reality is, if they're going to be encountering both CTE and non-CTE, you want to think about splitting that position between state and local funding to make sure that what they're actually serving is true to what you're funding the position with Perkins. Edgar controls that, our regulations there, and you do have the ability under Edgar to adjust that throughout the year. So let's say that you have a career advisor and you're estimating that 20% of the time they're going to be working with non-CTE. After the first quarter, if you find out they're closer to 50-50, you have the ability under Edgar to make those changes. You would just submit a modification to us. And we encourage you, if you have those positions, to make sure that you reconcile that with the actual time documentation. And so if they have a student encounter log, take a look at that at the end of a quarter and ensure that the percentage is close. And if you need to make those changes, go ahead and do that. The same is true as if you say that they're 100% CTE, and then after the first quarter you realize that they really are split. You can make those changes, but we want to be very, very careful, because under Edgar we have to have documented evidence of who they're serving in those positions, and it has to match the time and effort documentation.
That's good.
Okay?
Yeah, that's very good. Very well said.
So this is our Perkins Online Data System. It's pretty straightforward. If you ever have any questions, like I said, myself, Ashley, and Tony can try to assist you. If you are not sure what your college's login is, please let Ashley know. For those of you who are brand new, she can hook you up with that. And just remember, it is the college account that you use for this particular purpose. There will be training later on throughout the year, and everybody has a personal account also, but your local plan is used with the college account that you have here. So I'll open it up for questions.
We have a few questions. Let me get a little closer to the microphone here.
Okay.
I think we might have answered a couple of these, but let's see what we've got here. So the first one says, I've attached one job description. Will I be able to edit and add another?
Yes, we have given the colleges the ability to add up to 10 job descriptions to do that, and so you should be able to go back in there and just attach the others.
We have used Perkins funding for Pivot Point cosmetology materials in the consortium in the past. Will we be able to do so in the future?
That is a great question. Actually, the Act that we're currently operating under actually has a specific reference to pooling of funds to leverage those funding to receive discounts. So even if you're not in a consortium, the Act does allow you to get together with other colleges and purchase software or other resources. In this particular example, there are 4 schools that are pulling funds, like Mr. Cobb here at Brunswick. Those 4 schools are actually joining together. They are not in a consortium this year, and they are purchasing Pivot Point and some nursing software that way. It's actually cheaper for the 4 schools to purchase it than it was individually. So for those of you out there who are not in a consortium, if you have some colleges close by and you would like to do that, that is actually a great use of funds, because especially if you're getting a significant discount with that.
All right, and one more question. It's an equipment question. If Perkins was used to purchase a piece of equipment 5 years ago and the item needs to be replaced, is it still considered supplanting to use Perkins to replace or upgrade the equipment? For example, several years ago we purchased 3D printers for our geomatics program. Let's assume that one or more needs replacing. Is it okay since it was originally purchased with Perkins funds?
That is a good question, and it's a pretty tricky one. One of the things is, if you've purchased something with state funds previously, if you used state funds to purchase it and then you want to use Perkins funds to replace it, that would be supplanting. If it was something that was used with Perkins funds and you've never used state funds to do that, you could then use Perkins again to upgrade that equipment. But you've got to be really, really careful and make sure. We had some monitorings this year where we had some replacements happening, and if state funds were used to purchase the equipment, you cannot then come back after the fact and replace or work with that equipment with Perkins. And so the litmus test there is, have you ever used state funds to do that? And if you have, then it's supplanting.
All right.
So do we have any other questions? So I know for a lot of you, I think the vast majority of our colleges have most of these documents in. I know that we have some folks who are brand new to Perkins, and so the question has come up with one of those contacts, what if we need to make some changes? And if you need to do that, like Tony said a little while ago, the sooner the better, because in order for us to release the funds after the state board approves them, we will need to have everything approved and ready to go. But you do have a little bit of time to do that. Just contact Tony and myself and let us know that that's happening. I know that we may have asked some of our new folks for additional information, and you are not able to provide that clarification, and so you may need to go back to your administration to work on that. just know that we haven't set a hard due date on those, but
Yeah.
we can't release the funds until we have everything approved. So if you can get it to us before the state board meets, then once that happens, everybody will be ready to start the year off. So any final questions before we wrap this up? Next week, our webinar will be on Monday, not Tuesday. And so we just wanted to make that clarification. And I believe our topic is Perkins resources and what else? I'm drawing a blank here this morning.
Well, you know, we can actually go to our
Webinars, our webinar link.
page here.
There we
There
go.
it is.
Performance indicators and resources. So next week we'll be talking about our data performance measures and the resources we have available for your college's performance and improvement plans. And like I said, that is on Monday, not Tuesday.
This would be a good idea for you to get together and go over your plan. And if you have some good ideas, and share them with the rest of the colleges so everybody can get some good ideas on how to improve their performance plan through some best practices that we have across the state.
And it would also be good for those of you who are new to engage with your institutional effectiveness folks, and they are perfectly welcome to join in our webinar. Just they can use the same link to register that we provided for you. Some of them may already be aware of our Perkins performance measures, but if you're not sure, feel free to invite them so they can see what we have available as well.
That was very proactive because institutional effectiveness is a great way to enhance item number 6 in your plan, evaluations.
Absolutely. Alrighty, folks, we'll see you on Monday at 9 a.m. And if you have any questions in the meantime, just let us know. Have a great day.
Thanks, y'all.